This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we are going to do another mail time episode. And for those of you who are new to this channel, just back up a second and explain to you what mail time is exactly. So I've been doing this channel now for about 15 years, and I would say about 10 years or so ago, I started putting my mailing address in the show description, and eventually people started sending me books that they had made. It was kind of something that was unexpected, but I guess what was I asking for putting my mailing address in there? But it was really cool because people were sending me really good work. And so I decided back then that I would share that work in these videos because I figure somebody has gone to the trouble to make something, and I think that's something that should be rewarded. And the work that's been sent in over the last 10 years or so has been largely really good. And that's something that I just find very inspiring to me as a photographer, and it's something that I share with you guys. And this has just sort of become a thing. And over the years, I've actually, we did a count on this recently. It's been about 300 books, zines, prints, whatever people have sent in that I've actually done videos on. I've gotten into a schedule now where I do 2 of those a month. That's what that is that we're doing in this video today. Every now and then, though, somebody will send something in that is just ridiculously good, like over, above, and beyond any kind of expectation of what you would think of as just getting unsolicited mail. And that's where we're going to start today with this book. So the title of this is The Bridge. This comes to us from Michael Hulen. I believe I'm saying that right. This book is actually a portrait of the Golden Gate Bridge. The entire thing kind of unveils that as you go through the book. I absolutely love the way this starts out. You start with a bunch of two-tone graphics that kind of give us an introduction. Then we move into Michael's work, and the work is absolutely incredible. He has this style that has a language of geometry that he's using in here. It's a lot of real close-ups. And if you took any one of these images just on its own, you might not recognize it as the Golden Gate Bridge. But when you put these together as a set, it starts to reveal itself. The other thing that I think is externally mature about this body of work is the way that it's laid out in the book, that we have this progression that leads up to the middle of the book where we actually have a shot of the underside of the bridge, and then it progresses through to the other. And it's just, it has a logic to it. It's just extremely well thought out. And I think this is one of the best things that I've seen that's coming in a long time. I find this work inspiring. A couple things that I find very impressive about this is, first of all, Michael's sense of space, his use of negative space, of sense of form, of dividing the ground relationships with figures. I think it's just really well done. There's kind of this precisionist aesthetic that comes out of this. It makes me think of somebody like Charles Sheeler in a way, although I think his work has kind of moved into a different direction. The other thing is when you look at this from a chromatic perspective, so these are all color images, and then the only colors that we're using here, it's a very limited palette. We tend to have blue sky, we tend to have the color of the bridge, and then there's kind of shades that are defined by the shadows. The other interesting thing that I find about this is if you just ask me what is the color of the Golden Gate Bridge, just based on what I've seen in pictures and in person, I would tell you probably orange would be my definition. And what's interesting is this book really brings that into a very specific shade of orange that starts bending towards red. And I think it's just really cool. And it's another thing that you think you know something that's an iconic landmark like the Golden Gate Bridge, but as you go through the artist's representation of what that is and his interpretation through these works, you see it from a very different perspective that I personally have never seen. If you walk along the Golden Gate Bridge, you know, our eyes tend to work as wide angles and we take everything in all at once. And to narrow in on these very specific compositions and then to have that unfold as a whole is really interesting. Now, Michael did send me a note along with this, and this is a project he's been working on since 2018. So we're talking about 5 years from inception to actually having it published as a work. And I think that's really impressive. The other thing, too, is that if you've ever been to San Francisco, you'll notice that in these shots, there are no fog images, there's no dreary day images. And so to get this with even lighting that kind of goes across and makes a uniform collection of images like this is something that is very time consuming. It involves timing, it involves going back a lot, it involves, I mean, we're talking a multi-year project, and that's very evident in this work. And I think that's what's most impressive about me, or to me, is that we have something that's so simple, but it's so complex when you start thinking about how this was probably put together. So I obviously get sent a lot of zines and books. And one thing that's really important that I try to stress a lot that goes beyond just the photographs that you're including in a project is this idea of form and this concept of form. And, you know, if you think of this like, let's say in musical terms, and you have a song, you've got verses and choruses, choruses repeat, sometimes you have a bridge that breaks it up, and start thinking about projects like that. it takes on a new identity, and it's treated like, is the work the photograph or is the work a collection that works as a book? Now, if you go to the bookstore today, you'll notice that there are an enormous amount of photography books, and not all of them really take form to heart. And I think it's something that when it works, the book does become a work of art, and I think that's something clearly Michael is going for here. And then finally, I think the icing on the cake for me is just the graphic layout of this book. The fact that there's not a photograph on the cover, that it's actually done as an illustration with kind of this geometrical style to it that's very flat in terms of tones and colors and shapes. This is a direct mirror into Michael's style of photography that he's using for this, and I think it's something that complements it really well. This is just really well done. Michael, thank you for sending this. This is very inspiring, and I highly recommend you guys support your fellow colleagues here, especially when people are turning out work like this. I will put a link to everyone that we're featuring today in the show description. You can go buy this book, and it is fabulous, and I highly recommend it. One day, I'm going to do a best of mail time, and we're going to revisit and look at some of the things that have been sent in that have been particularly good, and this is the type of work I'm talking about. And I love sharing this with everybody because we're all kind of, you know, in this search for what we're trying to say as a photographer and what we're trying to do with our own work and how we're trying to present it. And, you know, I do a lot of critiques when we do these videos. You'll see some of them today. There really isn't much that I can say about this other than I'm just really inspired and it makes me want to go do work myself. And that's why I wanted to share it with you, because I think there's something really clear to learn here in terms of just the way this is organized, the way it flows. Awesome job, Michael. You should be extremely proud of this. All right, so we've got some other cool stuff here. There's a really awesome book with abstracts, and I've got something that deals with macro that's actually really nicely done. But first, I want to give a special shout out to our sponsor today, who are the awesome folks over at Squarespace. How easy is it to build an amazing website in a matter of minutes? Squarespace has you covered. It's dead simple. Head over to Squarespace, hit get started. You can start by selecting from an impressive collection of customizable templates, or you can do what I do, build your own. Something unique because, you know, you're not like other websites. Give your site a name. Next, you can build your homepage. We'll start with a few preset layouts just to get us going. Want to sell products like books or prints? Well, you can feature those on your homepage. Create a few more sections if you want. Let's also give it a color palette. There's a whole bunch to choose from, and just get us started. We can change this all later. Next, let's select the typography choices. Welcome to your website. Everything is set up and it's all ready for you to customize. Squarespace is built on Fluid Engine, the next generation of website design. Select Edit, and Fluid Engine allows you to drag, place, and resize any element on the page. You can snap these to a grid, you can make them float on top of one another, you can freeform however you like. You can even preview and adjust how the site looks on either desktop or mobile. The layouts are independent. Of course, you'll want a portfolio for your work. Creating an image gallery is as easy as dropping a folder of images on your web browser. Once uploaded, you can drag to resort, customize the look, and Squarespace writes all of the code for you. Everything just works and it looks fabulous. Want to sell your own prints, books, or zines? Squarespace has the capabilities to not only set up your online store and collect payments, but they also give you all the tools that you're going to need to be successful. Managing shipping and payment options, manage your orders, and engage with your customers. They even give you the tax tools that you need to keep things organized and stay compliant. You should try Squarespace for yourself. It's absolutely free, no credit card required. Just go to squarespace.com/AOP, sign up for that free trial. If you decide Squarespace is right for you, I can save you an additional 10% on your order by using offer code AOP on checkout. That's right, the code is AOP. So stop procrastinating, go build your website today. And I want to give a special shout out and thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. All right, so next up is this book, which is actually an exhibition catalog. And this comes to us from a German photographer by the name of Thomas Wunsch. This is called Heart of Darkness. Thomas and I, full disclosure, have actually had an email exchange. He responded to an email that I had done on abstraction, and he actually is an abstract photographer who works professionally, and this is something that is very unusual, and he does really good work. I actually looked Thomas up later after we had emailed, and this guy's the real deal. So as we go through here, you'll see that the elements that that Thomas uses in his abstraction involve things like graffiti, found objects, textures, a lot of typography. There's a strong graphic dominance to all of these, and they're really quite interesting. And I would actually love to see this exhibition because I would love to see these arranged on the wall together. We have a small preview of that in the front of this book, and I think this is really well done. The whole idea of abstraction is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I think there's so many different elements to this and different ways it can go. And the work in here, just because of kind of the found object look that he has to a lot of it, does remind me of people like Mark Bradford, maybe even abstract expressionism to an extent. But this is really interesting because you really don't see this done with a camera too much. It's one thing to do painting, and I've talked about this before, that when we talk about photography, you know, painting, things like that, that's an additive process. You have a blank canvas and you're going to add something to it, and you add something else to it, and eventually you come up with a work of art, whether it's abstract or literal. But in photography, this is very different, and I think it creates a unique challenge to abstraction in that it's a subtractive process. You're deciding what's not going to be in the picture and what you want to emphasize, and that's how you're going to work out your composition. I think these are really interestingly done, and I think this is just really fascinating to see. The title of this, Heart of Darkness, is very interesting. Some of you may know that is the title of the book that later became Apocalypse Now, the film. The book is incredible, the movie's incredible, and so the title is very interesting. And another thing, because I did look up Thomas after we had emailed, is that Thomas has done, I think it's over 70 covers now for ECM Records, which is something that is very close to my heart because I'm an enormous fan of ECM. If you're not familiar with ECM, it's an obscure record label, but they do jazz and avant-garde progressive recordings that they've been doing since the 1960s. And there's a certain school of artists over the decades that has kind of changed out that tend to work with ECM, and Manfred Eicher is the gentleman who produces ECM. There is a video that I will link up to that's an interview with Thomas. It's in German, but has English subtitles. And it's very good. And he talks a little bit about the process with ECM and how unique that is, and that he's not really told what to do. It's fascinating. Another thing he talks about in that interview that I'll let you guys see it on your own, but the whole idea that when he does these images, the tendency for people who see them, including gallery owners, is they always want to know where it was taken, what was the place. And that's something that Thomas does not want expressed in these, that they really could be anywhere, technically, that the place is not that important. Anyway, it's really well thought out stuff. Thomas, I'm going to reach out to you here, and I'll reach out to you in an email also. But abstraction is something that I've become very fascinated with more recently, and I think it would be really cool to work together in some realm in that. Maybe we do a discussion, or you can come and do a guest email on the list or something like that. But this is really well done. So you guys go check this out. I'm going to link up to everybody in the show description, and definitely watch that video. Thomas, this is awesome. Thank you for emailing initially, and thank you for sending me the catalog. All right, so next up we have something that's a little unconventional for the types of things that we show on here, but this is actually very well done. This is called Revolving Pins. This comes to us from John Andresen, and John also includes a note which reads, "Dear Ted, I am an amateur photographer who specializes in macro photography. It started as a way to document and share my collecting passion. I collect Urishi and Maki-E fountain pens, which is essentially high art in pen form. Macro photography is perfectly suited to capturing the unique beauty and fine details depicted on this type of pen. In addition, macro photography is not amenable to cell phone photography. The barriers imposed by macro photography enable one to find a unique photography style that is not easily replicated. Your videos have encouraged me to think more about composition and style within and beyond macro photography. They have also helped encourage me to print and share my work beyond Instagram. Enclosed, please find my first magazine focused on the Urishi and Maki-E work from a craft maker in Japan. I have distributed a few dozen copies to fellow enthusiasts, but it would be most gratifying if the magazine was well appreciated by the makers of the pens. More magazines are in the works. Thanks, and I hope you have a great day, John." So John, awesome little zine. I love the idea, and I have a few thoughts and suggestions that I would make on this. First of all, kudos and hats off, because macro photography, as he stated in here, really is not easy. And he talks about this in the book, about his process of focus stacking and so on and so forth. I have recently myself been doing more macro photography when I did the video on the watch recently, and I have an utmost respect for people who work in the macro world. Dust is crazy evident when you start doing stuff like that. There are things that you don't see with your eye that all of a sudden when you're doing one-to-one reproductions, boy, there's stuff living down there you had no idea existed. And I think the idea of Urishi pens is very cool. The advice that I would give to you on this, and this is just my opinion, you can take this however you want. I like the idea of this, and I think that you are probably probably very inspired by the whole craft aesthetic and this idea. It's more of a Japanese cultural idea of doing something very specific very well, and you see that evident in the art that goes into the pins. This exists in other things too. I think even within watchmaking, there's a Japanese contingent that's gotten really hot in the last couple of years that are making dials that have similar ideas. Yorishi also, the lacquer finishes and enameling and things like that. What I would suggest is maybe taking a cue from that and trying to apply it to the design of your zine a little bit. This gives me a lot of information, which I don't dislike. I actually really do like that. But it's given to me in a very intense way that is culturally very different than the art that you're showing in here. Now, you could look at that as a contrast, but I would try to make it a little bit more minimalist and actually look into Japanese design aesthetic for the graphic components that you're doing with the zine also. I think that also you're probably limited on space in here and you're trying to deliver a lot of information. But if you're talking in your letter about doing multiple zines like this, maybe what I would do is just make each zine or each magazine here just on one little topic. So do one that's just about focus stacking, or do one that's just about the idea of Yorishi pens and the lacquer technique that comes behind that. I think that would give you cohesiveness to the books that you're doing, or the magazines in this case, that's going to be a little bit more refined, and I think it's going to make more sense if you follow the form of the subject that you're given. Anyway, nice work. I want to thank everybody for sending stuff in today. I will put links to everybody's stuff in the show description below. There's some really nice stuff here. And so anyway, if you guys have any questions, drop me a comment. I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, later.